All right, well, I think we're going to get started today. Hello and welcome, everybody. You have arrived at today's IAM online webinar, a strategy for cross-institutional course sharing. Very exciting and relevant topic. We really appreciate you joining today's monthly webinar. This is our monthly gathering focused on all things identity and access management, brought to you by InCommon and Internet2. My name is Jean Horszewski. I am the InCommon Academy Director, and I am your host today. So as we get into things, I just want to do a little housekeeping before we dive in. So as you listen today, we're really excited about our presenters, and they're going to be talking about a lot of great stuff. So we encourage you to submit your questions as they come up. If you hover over the lower portion of your Zoom window, you'll see there's a Q&A function, a Zoom Q&A function. Sometimes it's hidden under 3 dots, so check it out. But if you have a question, please send them along as we're presenting, and we will reserve them probably till the end of today's session. But also, if you just want to chat and post live as we're going along, use the regular chat function. Just make sure that you click the little drop down and select everyone instead of just hosts. And we will be recording this webinar today, so you will receive a link via email, and you can also find today's recording as well as our slides on our website, as well as our YouTube channel. So to kick things off and to introduce our presenters, I am very happy to pass the mic over to Ann West, Senior Director for Strategic Partnerships and Research for InCommon at Internet2. She'll introduce today's speakers and today's topics. So Ann, take it away.
Thanks, Jean. Next slide. So these are our speakers today. We have Amanda Burris, Program Administrator at IDEA. You'll hear all about IDEA shortly. Morgan Jones, Executive Director of IDEA, and Mark Wallman, the Vice President for IT and CIO at North Dakota State University, and also a member of InCommon Steering and past InCommon Steering Chair. So I'm going to ask folks as they take the mic to kind of introduce themselves as well, tell a little bit of background before they actually speak. So next slide. So let's get going. So topic flow today, we're gonna do a little intro on InCommon because it's always a good idea to just make sure everybody has a level set. We'll be exploring a little bit about why teaching and learning. Why are we looking at that now? And then we're gonna be passing the mic over to Amanda and Morgan to talk about the Online Higher Education Alliance, or IDEA, the partner that we're working with to kind of learn more about teaching and learning across organizational, across campus borders. Mark Wallman, who's also CIO of a campus that's a member of IDEA, will be kind of providing the IT side of things. And then we're gonna come back to me and we'll talk about outcomes and next steps and a way that you can participate if you're interested. Next slide. So I'd like to start out with a general overview of InCommon, and I'm going to read sort of a nutshell of a description of what InCommon is, because I haven't actually committed it to memory yet. I have to do that. But InCommon provides tailored identity and access management solutions, specialized tools, and strategic guidance for the specific privacy, trust, and security needs of research and higher education, empowering secure, scalable, interorganizational collaboration. I think that's really, really key today. So the two primary services that we're known for is Eduroam. I think most people kind of, if they think about Internet2, frankly, they think about Eduroam because it is the thing that is most known from essentially an end user perspective. It makes sense, right? It's an SSID. So we have about, Eduroam is a roaming access to global wireless. We have about over 3,500 hotspots, wireless hotspots here in the US, and there are over 10,000 around the world in over 100, I think it's 104 countries now. So organizations join Eduroam, higher education research. They enable access to Eduroam, and in return, they offer access for others to access their wireless network. So it's a federation of wireless access providers. So if you think of that, keep that in your head, right? InCommon Federation is the same thing roughly for services. It's single sign-on to over 6,000 services in the US and globally. So the US, we have about 6,400 services registered. And then we also merge our information, our services with global services offered by other research and education institutions. A really great example is CERN in Geneva, Switzerland, has a really lovely site for teaching and learning for higher education, for higher energy physics. So, but it requires authenticated access because they want to know who's coming, not necessarily who's coming in, but that the folks coming in are from higher education. So that's a service anyone can get to. You can join InCommon Federation and just access it today, and it is super fabulous. Take a look at it. Next slide. So we also have tools and people to help. This is a list of a bunch of things that we offer. We have the software to make the federated transaction, identity and access management work. We have a security layer that's the InCommon certificate service. It's unlimited SSL certs for one price. We do the professional and training. That's what Jean leads to protect your investment. We also have InCommon Catalyst Group, which is trusted corporate support. These folks provide integration services, hosted services, consulting for those who are interested in supporting identity and access management community practices in higher education. And then, of course, we have a community innovation cycle and engagement. And actually, you are participating in one of those today because the teaching and learning community engagement innovation cycle is a key part of what we're doing in our new strategic plan. So I just want to leave with some thoughts about InCommon in general. And so what most folks wonder about how we're related to Internet 2. We are actually part of Internet 2, which is a nonprofit. We've been working for about 20 years on single sign-on and access management strategies for the broader community. That was before Google, before Facebook. We've been around a while. We don't have shareholders. We don't have huge marketing budgets. We operate on slim margins, so you're not paying for a bunch of glitzy stuff that you won't use, or you're going to recycle, or you'll feel bad having it sit on your desk. So we're all about community-driven identity and access management, from the software to the training to the trust infrastructure to make it all work, and your ability to then include partners, whether it's corporate, government, others in this community, to enable your full, basically, access management across all your various needs, administrative, research, and education, kind of complete within InCommon. So let's move to the next slide. So why is InCommon looking at teaching and learning? Well, like you, right, there's a lot going on, and I'm not going to talk about all the things going on in higher education today. It's a very different world than it was even 6 months ago. I think we would all agree that. But 6 months ago, when we started this, we were reading about all the demographic changes and the changes in budgets that higher education is going to have because of that. If you are familiar with these sources, WICHE, which is the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education, has been studying K-12 and high school graduation since 1979. So this is a service that they provide to their members, but they make that data set publicly available. An interesting researcher from Carleton College, Nathan Graue, and I don't know if that's how you pronounce his last name, so if someone can correct me, I would love to hear what that is. Anyway, he's done a fabulous job taking that data and actually extending it into, okay, here's what the high school graduation rate or numbers of high school graduates have been in the last, since 1979, right? And that's great. What if we extend kind of the behavior and the likelihood of these graduates into the future? Next slide. And he's developed some really interesting sort of probability maps for the various areas of the country. You can see the key on the bottom, the blue is Western, S is Southern, Midwest, and Northeast. And you can see the demographics in particular in the Northeast and Midwest are kind of tanking. And that's in part because it has been, the birth rate has been going down in those areas already, Northeast in particular. Part of that was due to the Great Recession, but it actually started earlier in that. So those populations, especially in the Northeast, are aging. So they're not necessarily producing the same number of high school graduates. The graduates tend to go nearby, right? So there's some implications for institutions. You'll see the elite and the national four-year institutions, while they have some bumps, they're still looking pretty good, but it's the Midwest and the Northeast areas are having some interesting challenges. Anyway, after I'm finished, I'll throw a little video in the chat about Dr. Grawey's work in this area. It's fabulous if you're interested in knowing more about the demographic changes. Next slide. So the other thing that's going on is federal government insourcing, trying to insource. And of course, we're doing this even more now with tariffs, trying to do that even more. But we tried in 2022. Biden signed the Chips for America Act into law. And as a result of that, as a reminder, that's to bring inshore, right, the production of semiconductor chips. NSF partnered with Department of Commerce to develop a workforce development kind of funding program. So this is, the CHIPS Act is really an economic development piece, right? So industry, as well as engaging, and primarily, I think there was a pretty large awards to community colleges to educate local populations for these new jobs. And they were not necessarily certificate-based degrees. They are very much focused on working with the industry side. So there's a really interesting partnership. I think public-private partnerships that we're seeing growing around the country as well. So we have, demographic changes, the need to be agile and change, and maybe figure out programming differences, as well as public-private partnerships coming up on the rise. Next slide, please. And just today, these are just-in-time slides. I learned about Kentuckiana Metroversity. So this is a group of, I think it's 8 institutions that have been working since 1970 to share programs. And my understanding is that they sort of specialize in various areas and offer combined degree programs. The person who mentioned this to me had the observation that there's going to be more and more of these sharing types of relationships, in part because of the changes happening to the Department of Education. The institutions, especially regional and those located nearby each other, are going to start, it's driving institutions to do more sharing of services in addition to courses. So this is yet another kind of example. We'll hear more from IDEA about this, but I thought this is a really timely thing to throw into this deck. Next slide. So as I mentioned, there are opportunities. There's some things happening that are really, really challenging, but there's some really great opportunities out there. This article from this Southern Regional Education Board kind of outlines their work in the HBCUs, and the MSIs, the Minority Serving Institutions, historically Black colleges and universities, to collaborate across each of the institutions to share courses, and they're really great outcomes on that. Next slide. So I guess the question is, can IT be a strategic partner for course sharing? I think what we'd like, the premise is here, staying competitive means getting your empowering your campus to work effectively. It's really getting your head around who the markets you want to reach out to. That markets means people, right? What are the things they need? Things means resources. All of this, most of this, I'll just put a stake in the ground and say 90% of this, some of these new markets, there's a significant component of online education. So what do we need? We need to study, right? The people involved, who's involved in making decisions around course sharing? What is the richness of the academic materials that are needed to be shared or accessed? What is the goals, organizational goals and constraints? What's the friction involved? How hard is it to do this from an access management point of view? And what's the impact? And so our work with IDEA and Common's work with IDEA was all around interviewing and kind of leveraging Morgan and Amanda's good graces and their cabinet's good graces to interview a number of folks on campuses, do several surveys, and come out the other side with some findings about how hard is it, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, what are the misconceptions. And so, yeah, looking forward to hearing your thoughts, and I'll pass the baton over to, I think, Amanda.
I'll let Morgan, I can let you jump in first if you want.
Okay, awesome. Perfect. Great. This will be great to have us both up here. So good to see you. Well, not see you all, but thanks for being here. And the special thanks to Anne and Internet 2 and InCommon for inviting us to share with you today a little bit more about the work that we get to do on a regular basis. In just a few minutes, I'm going to talk more about the history of who we are and how we've arrived at this point that we're at. But first, yes, I'm Morgan Jones. I have been with IDEA since 2020. Prior to that, my background was in student affairs and student housing. And so I really do care deeply about the experience our students are having in the online education programs that we're offering. And so I'm going to let Amanda introduce herself briefly, and then we'll jump into what we have to share.
Thanks, Morgan. Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Burris, and I have been with IDEA for almost 9 years now. Among a variety of other things, one of my things that I oversee is Alliance-wide student services. And so working towards helping students have easier navigation, better access is definitely in everyone's interest within the Alliance, but definitely within my job duties. So excited to be here and share a little bit more about who we are, how we operate, and kind of the work that we've been doing with InCommon today. So Morgan, I'll let you jump back in.
We can jump to the next slide. So who is IDEA? You may have heard of us, you may not have heard of us. We often hear that we are the best kept secret in higher education. And so we have been around since the conversation started in 1994. So this is a long conversation coming, but we are a consortia of currently 20 universities who offer online programs and courses in agriculture and human sciences. So I think the first thing people hear when they hear about us is that, oh, are you an OPM? And we are not. Our programs are really run by faculty, and they're very much driven by experts in the field who are offering these programs collaboratively. So like I said, we date back to 1994. Dr. Joan Laughlin, who was an associate dean at the time at the University of Nebraska, gathered some of her peers from, I think it was 7 institutions that started talking about what would it look like for us to offer programs together. Maybe I have a faculty member that can teach, but we can't offer this full program, but our students need this. So how do we do this collectively? So it took them 6 years to start offering courses. So in 2000, Family Financial Planning Program was launched, and they offered their first courses. So at that time, it was put a VHS in the mail, send it to someone. They can watch an instructor on their VHS and correspond via mail. So things have certainly changed since then, but things continue to progress. The next year, what was Great Plains IDEA at the time officially created their policy and their practice infrastructure. So that happened in 2001. They received a FIPSI grant for that, and they founded themselves with 10 institutions. So things have continued to evolve, and I won't go into our whole history, but in 2003 is when things really started finalizing with a common price, and a members only website was created. And so at that time really is when the internet became more involved and things started becoming more engaging in that way. So we can jump to the next slide. Our mission is to serve learners essentially by offering online programs that are flexible and affordable. So many of the states we operate have quite a few rural students, and this is their opportunity to engage in higher education. So that is our goal, is to find new ways and efficient ways to share resources collectively. And then if we can go to the next slide here. So here is currently the breadth of the programs that are offered. You can see on one side, these are the human sciences programs we engage in. Almost all of that is on the graduate level. So the early care and education program is an undergraduate completion degree, but the rest are full graduate programs or graduate certificates. Our newest graduate certificate was launched spring of last year. So that's the Early Childhood and Family Policy Certificate. But yeah, these are all wide breadth of degrees in the human sciences area. And then similarly on the agriculture side of things, there's a lot more creativity in how these programs operate. So agriculture education is a full master's degree, but some of these are undergraduate or graduate course shares or certificates only. So there really is a wide breadth of the way that these programs and courses are utilized to either offer a full program or just support what's happening on our campuses. And maybe they just need an additional course or two to really enhance what their students have access to. And so particularly in the ag space, we often see it may be the leading grade scientist that's teaching at this one institution. And so our partners are thrilled to be able to offer the opportunity for their students to have access to someone like that and to take a course directly from people doing leading research and writing the textbooks on these things. So it's a really neat opportunity to collaborate and ensure students have the best education possible. If you'll go to our next slide. These are our member universities. So as you can see in green, we have universities that participate solely on the human sciences side. The orange is universities that participate solely on the agriculture side. And then in teal, you can see a number of our universities participate in both sides. So it really is all across the country. So you may have heard of us previously as Great Plains IDEA. That is what we were established as. And until really last year, that is the name we operated under. However, as you can see from the map behind these names, we are operating in California or Michigan or well outside of the Great Plains. And so it became apparent that some of our members didn't see themselves in the name Great Plains IDEA. And so we are now moving forward as IDEA. So we know that that's a little bit complicated. There's quite a few organizations that operate under the name IDEA, but we think it better represents who we are as an alliance. I will also point out our newest member joined last year. So we moved into the state of Mississippi. So they joined last year and our newest member here. Okay, move on to the next slide.
Thanks. So now that you've had an opportunity to hear from Morgan a little bit about how the Alliance operates, we wanted to share just a few more details about how this works from the student perspective and what it looks like for them. So students apply and are admitted at one institution which is what we call their home university. So this is where they enroll and pay their tuition, which is an established common price per credit hour. And each university uses their own LMS to deliver the courses. When a student completes their coursework, their degree or certificate is then awarded by their home university. So a big part of what makes this process possible for students without the need to transfer credits is our Alliance Student Information System, Expansis. If you can go to the next slide. So Expansis is our Alliance Student Information System. This system is not used just by IDEA. There are multiple other consortia that use this system. IDEA Campus Coordinators for our Alliance, IDEA Campus Coordinators input grades from teaching institutions into Expansis, and then following the grade translation process, export those grades into their home university system. So this allows students to take courses at other institutions without having to transfer credits. When a student completes their coursework, degree, or certificate, it then looks on their transcript as though all courses were taken at the student's home university. So although this enrollment and completion process for students is rather seamless, not everything is as seamless as we would like it to be. So students have reported one significant problem when taking courses through the Alliance, and I want to talk a little more about that. So if you can go to the next slide. So students taking courses through IDEA have continually reported difficulties with managing multiple logins. Many students have to navigate multiple university websites each semester to access courses with different usernames, passwords, and email addresses for each institution. So since students are working through these full programs, it's possible that they could be taking classes at 2 or 3 different universities in one semester, and therefore using different emails, logins for each of those institutions. So this is not only difficult for students to manage all of that information and navigating to those different sites, but it also takes away from the time that they could be spending on their coursework. And as Morgan mentioned, we are continuing to see growth in the Alliance as we are adding new partners, which just only adds to the complexity of this for students. So this feedback from students regarding their experience with managing multiple logins and platforms is really what has led to our work with InCommon, and also led us to a pilot project that we are just finishing up this semester in partnership with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. If you could go to the next slide. So in fall of 2024, our Alliance launched a single sign-on pilot with Kansas State University and University of Nebraska-Lincoln students. This pilot allowed K-State students to log into their UNL courses using their K-State credentials. In spring of 2025, this pilot was expanded to also include students from the University of Missouri and North Dakota State University. And the goal of this pilot project was really to provide proof of concept that a single sign-on platform was going to address student needs. Over the years, as we've been collecting data from students and talking with students, we were pretty sure that this was a solution that we needed to work towards, but we felt like we really needed to conduct this pilot to make sure that this was kind of the answer to what they were looking for. The feedback that we received from the pilot project has been overwhelmingly positive, and we're really excited about it. It definitely further confirmed for us the need to continue exploring a single sign-on platform for the Alliance, and really solidified the need for us to continue the work that we've been doing with InCommon and that InCommon has been doing. So our pilot project, the research that InCommon has been conducting, has really helped us to better understand some of the critical insights and next steps that we know will need to be taken in order as we look to establish a single sign-on platform across the Alliance. So I'm going to turn it back over to Morgan to talk a little bit more about that.
Thanks, Amanda. If you could go to the next slide, that'd be great. Okay, so I'm going to jump in and talk about some of the insights we've learned. So as Anne was mentioning up front, we do think the time is right for alliances like ours and for this kind of collaboration. We think it's a great time for IDEA to continue to expand, and whether that's into new disciplines or bring on new partners, but also we very much see a future in which alliances like ours are very commonplace. And we think one of the major obstacles for this is the single sign-on process for students. And so that's one of the reasons we're so excited about this work. And so as we look to the future, we want to be good partners in sharing the things that we've learned that make a partnership like ours successful. And so I'm going to talk about 5 different things that we've learned that we think can be helpful for others moving forward. We can go to that next slide. So the first, there are kind of 2 parts of this. On one side here, you're going to see the 4 principles that we operate under. So these are very near and dear to the heart of IDEA. They were developed early on and really guide the work that we do. So we believe really strongly in behaving as equals. So all of our partners at all of our institutions on all different levels, we see ourselves as equal, whether we're participating in 10 programs or 1. We really value the work people are bringing. We believe in sharing leadership on all levels. So there's lots of rotation on whether that's a faculty coordinator or a dean on our board. We know that this is complicated. We're working in 20 different universities. And so respecting and accommodating institutional differences is crucial to the success of our programs. There are some things that we need to keep the same at every university, and sometimes people need to do things differently. And sometimes course titles need to look a little different, and we work within that and we respect that. Similarly, our goal, and this is what's going to be crucial in today's presentation, is that simplifying student navigation. That's at the heart of what we do, is making this as easy as possible for our students. So with that in mind, I'm going to jump into the 5 different recommendations we have for others moving forward. So the first is to establish clear governance and shared standards. So as I mentioned, it took about 7 years for this idea to come to fruition and for us to have a clear policy and procedure manual, which we are still adding to regularly. So really developing that framework on how things are going to work, what folks' roles are going to be at every institution, how responsibilities will land is crucial. We have groups of like disability support services, department chairs, all different kinds of people that meet regularly to discuss how do we make this all happen logistically and to address problems as they arise. So creating clear communication pathways is really important to ensure that conversations aren't happening in silos. I think one area that we have left out maybe has been our IT colleagues. So I think early on, there was a lot of conversations on logistically, how do we make this work? And Expansis was developed, and that has served us so well. But those conversations have stalled out for a long time. And so the work we're doing now is re-engaging some of those partners and figuring out how do we move forward together. We know the solutions exist. So how do we do that collectively? So that is one of the first things we would say, is ensure your partners are on the same page in terms of shared standards and clear governance. Go to the next slide, please. The second would be to foster collaboration and build trust. Obviously, this is true of any group of people you're working with, so this is not rocket science, but we do think it's really, really important that an alliance be built on relationships. So we spend a lot of time, whether it's in Zoom meetings or at our annual conference, getting to know one another and trying to find new ways to communicate clearly and ensure we're also moving in the same direction. So like I said before, IDEA is not an OPM, and we really do deeply value the co-development of curriculum and shared expertise to ensure everyone's needs are being met at their individual institutions, and we're taking advantage of the best that institutions have to offer and the best that the faculty there have to share. So we our phrase that you will see all over our things is all for one and one for all. So we have leaned heavily over the past quite a few years. I think even our founders were really passionate about this motto of we all rise when we do it together. So it's our little nod to the 3 musketeers there in the corner. You can go to our next slide. As Amanda had mentioned, we really are passionate about designing student-centric solutions. So we do feel like that needs to be at the heart of what all of our partners are doing together. And so that was the heart behind Expansis. And we do think any alliance needs to keep that center mind and find a system that works well for them and their partners to ensure that students aren't trying to transfer courses all over the place and being kept in communication loops where they're getting different messages from different people, but ensuring that that is happening behind the scenes. So for us, we have campus coordinators on each of our universities who work really hard to ensure that students have the guidance they need and they're communicating regularly to ensure students are getting the same message regardless of what institution they attend. We can go to the next slide. Prioritize adaptability and continuous improvement. So like I mentioned early on, IDEA started with sending VHS tapes across the country. So obviously things have changed significantly at all of our institutions, and we continue to need to be agile, which is complicated when you're working with 20 institutions and their policies and their procedures for operating. And so we are regularly surveying students. They hear from us quite frequently, so we can ensure that program quality is being upheld and programs are being assessed. Our faculty engage in annual assessment to ensure we continue to evolve to meet the demands of students. And as workforce demands are changing, like Anne said, we want to ensure our programs are offering the support they need to be successful in their careers moving forward. And then I will go to our last slide here, our last recommendation, and that is to build for scalability and long-term growth. So we continue to launch new programs, we continue to bring in new partners. So we need any institution considering operating in an alliance like ours needs to really be thinking through, how does our infrastructure and processes support expansion? How do we ensure new partners can integrate into programs? So if we have a new university joining a program, what does that process look like? How do we ensure they're successful on their campus? How can we support them? And then plan for sustainability and growth while preserving the student experience and ensuring these changes aren't happening too quickly and that they're getting lost in the mix of that. So, and there's a lot coming at you real fast, but if you can go to the next slide. If you do have questions, I threw up Amanda and I's contact information. You'll get this slide later. If you have questions about alliances like ours, we're always happy to talk about the work we do and how we think it can really benefit students on a wide variety of campuses. So that is it for us. I'll pass it over to one of our great partners in IDEA. So NDSU is a partner we work with and really have for years and years. And so Mark is going to talk more about what that's like from their perspective.
Thank you, Morgan and Amanda. So this whole kind of problem fell into my lap through some kind of side conversations about people kind of hearing through the grapevine that students were kind of struggling getting access to the coursework at remote institutions, IDEA students. And so I was kind of excited about it because this problem, InCommon has been building infrastructure for years to kind of address problems like this. So similar problems exist in all sorts of different contexts. And it was kind of nice to hear this demand coming from service providers, people actually needing it, instead of like when I as a CIO are going to try and work with people on this. It's kind of hard sometimes to make them really understand how valuable this is when they're not necessarily directly working with people who are like these students who are maybe struggling a little bit with some of these services. So this was pretty exciting for me. I think that if we're kind of thinking about more in general too, this is going to drive other questions that we're going to have. And if I think of like the other cases where we have similar problems to solve, like the next question is going to be solving a library. I think we're just only solving a fraction of all the potential cases that we're going to have. I think some of the pressures on higher ed that Ann talked about early on are going to kind of drive us to more collaboration. And so, I think that this is kind of really important kind of to spotlight this and to show how this is going to be successful for students and institutions to be able to collaborate better and how it's going to improve services for our students. Bottom line, at least for me, is that this makes life easier for the students and there's little or no cost to the institutions. Pretty much every research university is participating in InCommon. Many more in number, even non-research universities, are already participating in InCommon. So this is pretty low-hanging fruit for many, many institutions across the country to kind of do stuff like this. And I think this is just kind of the right thing to do. I think also, if I'm looking ahead, I think that the way our non-IT administrators at our institutions or our leaders are thinking about these things, the way we currently, for the most part, do provide services like this doesn't really line up with the way people think about it. I mean, these students have a home campus that we're talking about, and they're going to just take a kind of a remote course at another institution. And the way that we're doing it right now is we treat these remote students as if they're fully our own students. And that's not really how it works. There's all this extra overhead and setup that we have to go through for it. And so I think that as we kind of deploy more solutions like this and facilitate things like this, it's also going to make it easier for our universities to say, well, we want to engage in a collaborative project like this. And I'll say, oh, well, we've already done something like this with IDEA. Here's an example. If we kind of replay this and just make a few adjustments, it's gonna work for us, and it's gonna work the way that you, provost, or you, president, or dean, expect it to work. So those are kind of my general comments on this, and I'll pass it to our next slide here.
Yeah, that's me, Mark.
Okay.
All right, we have one question from Clay Cooper, which I will keep to the end and kind of get through the next few slides, and then we'll be back to you, Clay. So what's next? So I think I ended my section with, can IT be a strategic partner for course sharing? And I think you've heard a really good, I think, kind of testimonial in a way for how IT can help with this agility. And I would call it institutional agility, academic agility, but really as both Morgan and Amanda were talking about, is communication between governance, between and conversations between the divisions and areas that across an institution. If IT doesn't understand the organizational vision for this, it can't plan for the capacity. If IT doesn't talk about the capacity needs and talk about the funding needs, then the academic side of the house doesn't have a sense of what they can and can't do in the short term and long term. So it's kind of like an ongoing conversation that needs to happen with respect to the vision and where the organization needs to go. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, and what IT can deliver and how fast. I think that the key piece that we're finding is that in this time of uncertainty, in this time of business and academic crunch in terms of both number of students, funding, new opportunities like the public-private partnerships that I mentioned, having a really solid identity and access management infrastructure that can be leveraged in federated access so that you can enable your students to access services by others, or for instance, enable that company that was funded by Department of Commerce to access your courses and have their staff access your courses as part of a public-private partnership. All of that can be done. All of that is super doable, and we know how that can happen. I think the case is this an organizational strategy to plan for this type of agility? Next slide. So next steps. So we have, and I think Morgan and Amanda did a great job outlining some of the findings that we had, as well as the impacts back to IDEA. So our next steps are really, hey, we have a sense of what the gaps are. Now we need to develop, we're calling it a toolkit. You could call it a playbook. You could call it a set of resources, right? That we can collectively put together as a community to help, and I'll just say help an organization do this course sharing. And to some extent, this is homed in IT, in part because they're the ones that have to handle the infrastructure pieces, so the training and the software and the services. But there may be, for instance, one-pagers or handouts or conversations, or again, a playbook for how to reach out to your stakeholders around the capacity and the needs, so that IT can plan for that. So if you're looking to share courses or resources, or are interested in participating, we'd really like to hear from you. Next slide. We do have a white paper that's a really high-level summary of what our findings were with the work with IDEA. We interviewed about 45 or so folks to kind of understand where the gaps were, as I mentioned, and did a survey on the IT capacity. And again, all of that is sort of in a very high level summarized in that white paper on the left. We'll also be doing a workshop on what we found with IDEA. Morgan and Amanda will be there, and a number of you also will be there that are on this webinar. Appreciate that. And we'll be talking more about what you might need in order to make this happen from an access management point of view at the Community Exchange in the morning on Monday, or in the afternoon on Monday, sorry. And then we'll also be doing a session on Wednesday around this as well. And so you can find out more information about those things there. And I think that's it. I think that's my last slide. So I'm going to go back to you, Clay, and I think you can come off mute and ask. But here's Clay's question. I know some institutions require a certain number of credits, that a certain number of credits are earned at the institution instead of transferred in. How is this handled through the IDEA program since courses are taught at various other institutions?
Yeah, that's a great question. So students don't transfer any credits or courses across institutions. Every course that is offered in a program is scheduled at each partner institution. So for example, if there is a class being taught in the youth development program and it's being taught at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, it's also being scheduled at each of their partners. So it's being scheduled at the University of Missouri, at Michigan State University, at Texas Tech. The course title and the number may be slightly different at each institution, but it's being scheduled there. So that is then what is going on the student's transcript. So that is one of the best things I think for students about the Alliance, in addition to just the experience that they're getting and getting to access these awesome courses from these different institutions and different faculty, but they're not having to deal with transferring credits. Everything is being scheduled and transcribed at their home institution.
Great. Any follow-on? Thank you, Amanda. Any follow-on comments, Clay? Thoughts?
There we go. Now I have the unmute button. Does that mean the accreditation for the course is happening at each school and not just the one that's doing the actual instruction?
Yep. Each of our universities has their own accreditation. And so those courses have to go through the course approval process at each university.
Excellent. Thank you.
So we're still open for questions. I have a few of my own. So, I mean, you all have been going for a long time, right? For 30 years. That's a lot. That's a lot of historical kind of memory, things that I've been working on for 30 years. Started off at a particular destination, right? A vision, right? And you end up maybe a little bit different than where you thought. So I'm wondering if you were to start again, right? We have, for instance, a number of folks from the Big Ten on this. Let's say the Big Ten wanted to share courses. What would you tell them? How would they start? How should they start?
Yeah, I think part of what we got at in our presentation is starting with relationships first. I think an alliance like ours requires a significant amount of trust. And this is Morgan Jones here. So yeah, just so you know who's talking at you. It requires that relationship before anything because it is a significant amount of work behind the scenes. And so our programs are made up of faculty who care deeply about what they're offering, and it requires that buy-in from every level, from deans to department heads to faculty. There really does have to be a true care for the work that's being done. And so I think one of the challenges we found is that as folks retire who care deeply about the work we do, as they retire or they move on into a different role in their career, we see that when IDEA is just a small checklist on your job duties, it doesn't grow in quite the same manner. And so finding ways to pass along that culture of care and that spirit of all for one and one for all is really, really important. Our culture is crucial to our success. And so we try to take time at our annual conference. We do laugh that it feels funny that online programs have an in-person conference for our faculty and chairs and deans and campus coordinators and everyone. But we find that creating space to celebrate the work we do and to get to know one another is important to our success. And so that's what differentiates us from an OPM or something like that, where you can maybe deliver the content without that same level of expertise and collaboration.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Personal trust is at the base. Yeah. Yeah, totally understand that. How in that light then, how do you onboard new institutions? I mean, Washington joined recently, right? Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we have learned is that it is not going to be a quick process. So it requires, when you're integrating a new common price, a new tuition model, a new, bringing on new things like that, take a lot of education. And so it often does require visits to a new institution's campus to meet with key stakeholders there. It requires really integrating faculty into a new group of faculty that can be complicated. And so onboarding does require a lot of time and a lot of intentional thought to go into that. We've seen it be really successful. So yeah, the University of Mississippi just joined us with the launch of a new program. And so that was a really good dovetail of something that was getting created, where they had a faculty member on their campus who really cared deeply about early childhood and family policy. And so this was a great collaboration for them to offer something they couldn't do independently. And so I think we've seen the most success when something new is getting started, to bring in new partners in that manner. But it really does take learning to tell our story well, because it is a lot of upfront work to get all of the systems in place. It's not just an easy press a button and everything's good to go. So yes.
Yeah, that's really, so the ideas for the sharing and the new degree programs come out of the faculty.
Yes, absolutely. So there is not market demand is interesting, but we are definitely not going to our institutions to say, the market says this is important, so therefore do this. Because often for those high demand fields, institutions are already doing that, or they can do it on their own. So we are looking for more niche areas that people can't be successful independently. And so I think we've found our faculty build quite a community, when previously they may have been the only faculty member on their campus, or one of two who was really passionate about a certain specific thing. And so they find, oh, I actually have colleagues all over the country who care deeply about this too, and we can create something really neat and interesting together. So
Yeah, that's awesome. What a lovely way to end.